host of the program and the guest this evening. I pray a special blessing on Mr. David Edwards this evening, that the good Lord will always guide him. May the contributions and suggestions made tonight provide a base for the improvement of the education system in this country. Father God, continue to hover over this radio station, that its programs will continue to be a source of light and inspiration for the people. I ask for your blessings and guidance on the program this evening, Father, and I ask all this in the mighty name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
The views expressed during this program are not necessarily those of Wise Q95 FM radio. Wise Q95 FM radio has not been able to independently verify the factual correctness or the allegations and statements made during the course of this program and cannot vouch for their accuracy. Therefore, Wise Q95 FM radio will not accept any responsibility or liability for the statements or allegations made in the course of this program. The views expressed during this program are not necessarily the views expressed. Good evening to all Dominicans, by and large. Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Workers' Voice today, the 18th of April, 2024. And it's going to be a hot topic, an important one dealing with education this evening. So we're going to tell you to stay tuned and be with us while we get ready for you. We have a special guest in the house, live in the studio. I will announce this man's name in a while. We will say good evening to all the constituencies from the north to the south to the east and to the west. Thank you for tuning in to the Workers' Voice. For all those of you who had a wonderful day, God bless. Those of you who are not feeling too well today, I wish you strength. There will be no doom. All the young children getting ready for the common entrance exams. You stay close to your books and listen to your mother. Listen to your father too. Because you are the future, and tonight we'll be touching on education. Let's get together. One love. For those of you in the Rosa Valley, you tune into the Workers' Voice. For those of you from Grand Forks, you tune in. For those of you Rosa Central, you tune in. Our good friend and our PRO is not feeling too well this evening, and he will not be with us. So I just want to wish him a speedy recovery, and drink lots of water, especially coconut water. You'll be fine. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to the next session of our program. Well, we could say the April the 18th session. We're going to talk about education. But just before I do this, thank you for Teacher Ernie for blessing us this evening. And of course, we are here. It's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to say good evening to the man himself, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, who is no longer 10 feet away, but really he is only 5 centimeters away. Well, not too close. Dr. Fontaine is in the house, and of course, with us, Mr. Soso Glenroy Coffee, caretaker for the Roseau Central constituency. And of course, Mr. Coffee, well versed in so many areas, from education down to agriculture. And believe you me, one of the profound delivery man in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, good evening, Soso. Good evening to you, Dr. Fontaine. Um, could we just have opening remarks for Mr. Glenroy Susufo? Go.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Ronald, and thanks everyone tonight, evening Dominicans, far and wide. Those of you who are glued in and tuned in at the various media platforms. I want to say good night to you all. Those of you who are already joining the boy by the internet. Good evening to everybody. Roseau Central, good evening to you. A proud city, a proud people. That we have to hold the stream. Let me say, good evening to my Bessie. My Bessie, let me just say thank you again for the invitation for this wonderful birthday party that you celebrated 95 years of age. And she's going to stay a 95-year person, senior citizen, done so well, strong legs and everything else. So thank you very much. God, I ask God's blessings upon you and your family. It was a well put together party, and I think I enjoyed it. My Bessie, thank you very much. That was a nice collaborative. Let me just say to all our friends all over, I just say hello to someone in California, no name, no one. And I would like to say, Freddie, good evening to you and your wife in Canada. But Ronald, yes, it's a pleasure again to be in studios, and like anything else, we will actually be chewing on some of the. Oh yes, certainly we'll be chewing on some of the some of the current issues regarding the National Bank and also electoral reform. These are still burning issues. And moving forward, we have our special guest. Let me say good night to our special guest. And let me say good night to Teacher Ernie, who have given us a profound prayer. We know it for sure with divine intervention, we can pull through. And to everybody, Blue, no harvesting tonight. I will give you a break. I suspect the carrots going down, so I'll give you a break. And to everybody in Paradise Valley, good night to you all. Dominicans at large, those of you who have to call in, I want to say good night to you all. Participate. That's what this program is all about. Interfacing, interchanging. We do not have all the answers, but we depend on you to participate. So good night to everyone, and just stay easy, quiet, and tune in. Let me just say good night to our executive. Our executive. We have been at work and doing very well, and I will tell you straight, we are hardworking. We're doing things. We are doing things. It may be behind the scenes. It may be somehow every bit of work counts, and we want to say that we want to thank everyone for his or her input into everything. So I just want to say, Dominicans, as usual, it's going to be highly participative, and we expect tonight's program again to be something of remarkable interest to you and the listening public.
Thank you, Susu Glenroy Coffee. And of course, we will call on Mr. Edwards just to give a brief remarks without the official introduction of Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edwards?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead. You're live.
Hey, good night. I'm David Edwards, and it's a pleasure to join you tonight, share some information and share some perspective. I look forward to a very interactive program.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, sir.
And of course, in studios this evening, we have Dr. Thompson Fontaine, the political leader of the United Workers' Party. He is on island. He is with us. And Dr. Fontaine, your opening remark?
Yes, Ron, good evening, and so, and of course to our special guest, David, and to our many, many listeners, to all of the caretakers, all of the executive of the United Workers' Party, all of you who give of your time, your effort selflessly, day in, day out for better Dominica. A good night to all of you. We're, of course, engaged in a battle for the better of Dominica. Is one that is sometimes it's a thankless task because the amount of sacrifice that you're called upon to make. But you've been faithful over all of those years. I've seen your faithfulness in keeping and sticking to the task. And I just want to salute all of you tonight and thank you. Even listening to the worker's voice is part of that sacrifice. It's part of committing yourself to a better Dominica. And I want to thank all of you and really say a very special good night and to say how honored I am to be there. And of course, a very special good night to our special guest who will be with us talking about a subject that is of very much importance to the United Workers' Party Team Dominica: education. We've been talking about agriculture in the past. We want to pivot a bit to talk about education, because what we're trying to do effectively is to show the Dominican public the areas that we will, as a government, be focused on. We believe that these are the things, these are the areas that will really take Dominica literally to the next level, not just in words, but in fact and in deed. And so it's really an honor to be with all of you. And for those of you who are joining us online, in fact, I need to make sure that you're connected online. And thank you so much for all of you who are already with us online. And we're looking forward tonight to a really great program, as we have several issues to discuss, even before we go into the education subject.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Fontaine. And of course, very soon we will be asking you to call these numbers: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 614-4257, 305 432 9624. These are the numbers that you can get us. So stay tuned. And we will be, of course, entertaining your calls, your concerns. And of course, we'll be looking at education, as we said. But before we do this, we're going to go to Dr. Thompson Fontaine to touch on some current issues. I believe Dr. Fontaine will enlighten us on some of the current issues, because while we will be speaking of education, and we have our special guest with us, Mr. Edwards. We will, of course, have the political leader who is in studio touch on some current issues. And yes, Dr. Fontaine.
Yes, certainly, Ron, and thanks again for all of you for joining us tonight. And you know, one of the things that I wanted us to discuss even before we go into the issue of education is a subject that you must have heard quite a bit of. It's a subject that concerns every single Dominican, because it has to do with our financial system, it has to do with our banking system, and it has to do with whether or not we have confidence in the banking system. And some of you may have listened, may have heard me during the week. You may also have heard our President, Honorable Lennox Linton, discussing this very important issue, bringing this issue to the fore. And I suspect that there may have been some confusion, because some people said, you know, you seem to be contradicting the president. I don't think it was a contradiction. What the president said in terms of what needs to be done with this. So I thought it would be good for us to spend just a little time talking about it and actually going over this, because the real issue and the issue really was has to do with the fact that it's been 3 years since the National Bank of Dominica had its AGM. And some people were saying, well, the reason why there is no AGM is because the bank is on the verge of collapse. So I said, no. I said, well, we have to look at these two issues differently. Okay, the fact that the bank has not had its AGM is a violation of the Banking Act. It's a violation of their own rules, because according to the Act, the bank is supposed to have its annual general meeting of its shareholders at least 6 months. And it does not say it might, it says it shall. Okay, if you look at the legislation, I think it's in Article 13 of the Banking Act, it says very clearly that the bank shall have an AGM every year, at least 6 months after the financial year has ended. It's going on 3 years, and obviously there is a lot of concern and rightly so. And the obvious question is, why is the bank not having a general meeting? Now, what happened in 2021 with regards to the bank? We remember in 2021, the National Bank of Dominica, it took over the Royal Bank, what was the then Royal Bank of Canada. That transaction was completed in March of 2021. Right after that, the bank did an offering of shares of 6 million shares. It offered to the public to purchase, and within that prospectus, which is what details what the bank is about and so on, there was in fact the unaudited statement of the year 2021, the fiscal year 2021. In there was the audited statement of 2020 and the unaudited statement of 2021. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying that there were numbers, there were figures that were put out there that the public would have seen, especially if you were interested in purchasing shares in National Bank. You would have looked at those numbers and seen a bank that at the time was worth about 65 to 70% of the total banking assets. So that means that this bank effectively is very big. It had just taken over a bank, another bank that was operating in Dominica it was even older than all of us here, I'm sure. And it had just taken off all the assets. And from everything that we saw, it was a seamless takeover. In other words, all the accounts were successfully transferred. All the transfers were done. Persons who had the loans paying continued to pay. Persons who continued to, so it seems everything was flawless. Okay, but it does appear now that after that time, something may have gone wrong. As I said, I will not speculate publicly as to what may be the cause of the delay. All we know is that there is a delay, and that delay is way too long. That is, after 3 years, you would expect whatever the issues are, whatever accounting issues, whatever all the issues are, that needs to be reported to the stakeholders or the shareholders should be reported. And that is what we are insisting on firstly. All right. Now, the question of a collapse is something completely different. And that is what I was trying to explain. That's what I was trying to explain when I spoke to Matt earlier this week, that you cannot say because you have the issue of a delay in the annual general meeting of the bank that somehow everything is falling apart. It does not mean that. And the reason why I say that is because the bank is under the jurisdiction of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is responsible for the supervision of the banking system in Dominica, as well as in all the other OECS countries. And the reason why, or in fact, part of how they actually do this is that they have a set of ratios that they look at. All right. And that is very important. So, for example, one of the key things that the central bank will insist on is that a certain percent of your deposits is called your deposit ratio. A certain portion of all the monies that depositors put into the bank has to be kept in a reserve with the central bank. So, in other words, if depositors put in $100 million, the bank cannot spend this whole $100 million. I think right now the ratio is probably 25%. I should have checked the ratio, but I think it's probably in that range. Usually it's in that range. So at least 25% of the $100 million must be in a reserve with the central bank. And that's one of the ways you kind of protect customer deposits, okay, by making sure that this amount is that you satisfy this capital reserve ratio, that it is always there, so that if anything you can draw on. Now, what causes banks to collapse? Banks tend to collapse when there is a lack of confidence in the banking system or in the bank. So if people believe that their monies are not safe, if people believe that the bank is going to go under, then what they will do, they will have what we call a run on the bank. They will stand outside the bank in their hundreds and their thousands and demand that they want their money and they want it now. The problem is if everybody demands the money at the same time, there's a good chance that money is not all there because the banks would have given this money out in loans, which is what that's how the banks make the money. They take in deposits, they on lend in the form of loans to customers, and this most of that money comes in small amounts. It comes in trickles. So going back to a $100 million example, 25% is with the central bank. I'm just giving that as an example. Another, say, 60% is out there in loans. The bank only have reserves of probably 10. They probably have only 10% in there. So if everybody comes for their money, the 100 million is not there. There's only 10 million. So that could cause the bank to collapse. And that is when you have problems. Nothing in a delay of an AGM suggests that's what is going on. And the other reason, and which is very important to note, we are part of a currency union. And the very same way in which our currency, the EC dollar, the value of the EC dollar is guaranteed to some extent is because of the strength of all of the economies put together. So if things are not going well in Dominica, but things are going well in Antigua and Grenada, this balances off. Okay? So at the end of the day, the currency is protected. A similar thing happens there. It's true there are only 2 commercial banks in Dominica, but under the supervision of the Eastern Caribbean Central Banks, all the banks in all of the ECCB region. So all of those banks contribute to this reserve ratio. So at any one time, the ECCB has enough resources, all right, so that if one bank is in trouble that it supervises, it can make this money available. So coming back to the issue of the collapsed bank, if there's a run on the bank, and when people come for the money, there's only 10 million, but then the bank can quickly call the central bank and say, hey, we have a problem. Okay, here's $90 million so that you can take care of it. Everybody will be satisfied, and then the problem is over. All right, so I do not want the Dominican public to be of the view that somehow, because there's not an AGM, that the banking system is falling apart. Okay, that is not what you use to gauge whether or not the banking system is falling apart. Now, I'm not saying that everything is nice and dandy. I'm aware of the huge amount of non-performing loans that are there. I'm also aware of the fact that we have a very weak economy, and probably the level of profitability, the amount of profits being made might not be as much as it normally should be, but that should not be interpreted as Kaipul quasi things are falling apart. So I just wanted to reinforce that point, because I got a number of queries, a number of calls. In fact, right after I was just speaking to Matt, so a guy called me from the States and he was like, my question to you, should I withdraw my money from the bank? Should I pull my money from the bank? I'm hearing that things are falling apart in Dominica. Should I take my money out of the bank? And I'm like, why would you want to do that? There is no reason. There is no reason to want to take your money out. It's if you start taking out your money that you put pressure on the banking system. So I would really like to go out on a limb there and really urge the Dominican public to be calm. I understand that the issue of the AGM is being addressed. And from what I saw, the bank is in the process of having an AGM within the next few months. So, what I would really urge is for the bank to do it quickly. And whatever the reason for the delay, that this be explained completely to the shareholders, those who have a stake in the bank, and to the depositors in the bank.
Well, yes, and I'm happy that you brought it up, because in the ECB as the ECCB as the principal authority, obviously the bank, if that bank has a problem, we'll have to communicate that to the ECCB, which of course will grant the delay, of course. So I'm happy that you're able to make the distinction. But again, to not what we have heard in the past, that people are concerned about the majority shares that the government hold as well, and the implications there are, because remember at the time that the government borrowed $120 million, and remember it was exceeding the overdraft limit. And obviously, well, again, thanks to the opposition leader at the time, Honorable Nelson, who again brought that to the public, and that converted that 120 million to a loan. And so if you don't have that majority shares, you'd not have taken advantage. And not the only problem is that too, yes, while that 120 million was probably borrowed by the government, but what have we seen for it? What have we seen for it? If that money then was borrowed to private entities, then you'd have seen a boom, a spill off in the economy. You'd see construction, you would have seen employment, and you'd have seen those things. So these really are the concern, but I'm happy that you made the distinction. And there's no way that, a delay of an AGM probably would have some kind of negative implication with respect to the bank going on there. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're still tuned to the Workers' Voice. It's the 18th of April, 2024. And with us, our guest, Mr. Edwards, is in the house. And of course, the political leader, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, alongside Glenroy Susu Coffee. And we're still on some current issues. And yes, Dr. Fontaine, can you enlighten us a little bit on electoral reform? Thank you.
You know, I was actually just today, as I was coming through, I was actually reading up on the decision of the CCJ, or the opinion, not the decision, but the opinion of the CCJ regarding electoral reforms in Dominica, and it reminded me of why we are doing what we are doing, because for successive elections, as a party, we have been lodging. At the end of every election, those what is technical term that we use for this when you lodge the protest after elections?
Electoral petitions.
Petitions,
Yeah.
right? Petitions, which kind of demonstrates that the process was not free of fair, and we've been doing that without fail, and year election after election, the local judges have been throwing it out, or if they don't throw it out, they listen to it so late that by the time it comes up, election, it's already, the party is already in place
everything
for 3-4 years. And what happened was in 2019, we caught a break. I think so. So you're one of the petitioners in that one, and it actually got to the CCJ.
Right.
And the CCJ was clear, and the reason why it got to the CCJ is because the Eastern Caribbean Court of Appeal refused to allow the appeal of the petition. They refused to hear the appeal because, as usual, the local judges were throwing this thing aside. It was appealed to the, and the ECCB was saying no. And the court was very clear, extremely clear, that the court, the Eastern Caribbean Court of Appeal, erred in not hearing the appeal. They made that very clear. And they were very hard on the local. Said, but how could you not have given that a hearing when the questions that have been asked goes to the very heart of free and fair elections? And how could you not have listened to it? Because it is quite possible that they could have proven that there was not free and fair elections. And as it were, they listed several areas where things are not as it should be, access to the radio station and different things like that. And the CCJ made the very important point that no future elections in Dominica should be held with similar tints. In other words, this 2019 election, like the elections before, it was tainted and it should not. So that is why we are in this fight for electoral reform. And that's the reason why, and we need to remind the Dominican public that our party took a decision to not contest the 2022 elections because the taints that were spoken of by the CCJ had not been tackled, it had not been dealt with, and it was just business as usual. And we thought we had to make a very dramatic case. And people were saying, but why did you not contest? You would have won 6 seats, or we'd have won 9 seats.
I know.
we still would not have won.
That's
right. If we'd only won 9 seats. So this idea that we should have contested because we possibly could have won more than the 3 seats that we have is not good enough. We stood on principle that the process was flawed, and the CCJ said, who had neutral look at what was going on in Dominica, said, under no circumstances should this country continue to operate that way. And that's the reason why we are continuing the fight for electoral reform. It is now 2 years and counting since this very famous decision or opinion by the CCJ, and we still do not have electoral reforms. And that is what we have been pushing. And what we are asking for is quite simple. We have a voters list that is 74,834 persons.
Right.
That a population that we all estimate and we believe to be 70,000. If you compare Antigua has close to 100,000 people. The voters list is 44,000. Okay, so we have 30,000 more persons on our voters list than Antigua whereas they have 30,000 more people than we have. So something is wrong with this picture. So we
Yes.
want a clean voters list as number one. Secondly, we want a voter ID, because
Voter
the
ID.
way this government has been able to get away with the cheating and the stealing of the elections is to get people in and then to say that they are this person. I had an agent in one of the villages tell me that this person came in and said, that this is that is there on that list. That let's say the person's name was James Selle. She said, but no, that's not James. I know James. I was in the same class with him. That is not him. And when she challenged him, he just turned and went out. Okay. So you had people doing this, and apparently that was a wide scale. So they were bringing people out from all over, God knows where, bringing them into our polling areas and really violating the very essence and what goes to the heart of our electoral system. And so we need voter ID cards, and also we need access to the radio station. And there is no way why, in this day and age, a radio station that is paid for by taxpayer dollar becomes the only avenue, or the avenue only for the party in power. This is not fair. It's not right. So these are some of these things. There are others, of course. The vast sums of money, the obscene
Campaign
amount of money that has
financing,
been used, the fact that you're bringing people in, treating people who are on the list and so on, the fact that the government simply refuses to give money to clean the voters list. I remember it was in July of, I believe, 2018 or 2017 when we got notice that the electoral office was finally ready to clean the voters list.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well,
that was
elector-
completely shut down.
Famous letter.
That was shut down by the government. Okay, so that is what we're up against. And we have not forgotten, the Prime Minister promised, or he said over and over again that he's going to have it. And then, it was very interesting to note. The Prime Minister was like, nobody's going to prevent me from having electoral reform. But we're like, you're the problem. Nobody's preventing you. You're the one that has prevented it up to now. You're the one, as the responsible person or party, to take this thing to Parliament.
That's right.
It is not us. It is you, as the Prime Minister, who is responsible for all legislation, that has to take it along with your Attorney General, take it to the Parliament for passage.
That's
so,
correct.
Mr. Prime Minister, nobody's stopping you. We've been demanding and requesting that this be done, and it is high time. The Prime Minister gave the impression there that, I'm sure anybody listened to that famous press conference, they were of the view that electoral reforms will come in the following week.
Right.
It's been several weeks and there's nothing. What is going on? Okay. So that is something that we need to keep pressing. We need to keep pushing, and we will not relent until we have electoral reforms in Dominica. We have to maintain the sanctity of our electoral process. Clean, free, and fair and credible elections in Dominica.
And as you said that, I want to say too that Roseau Central had a good case. In fact, George Glasgow, who was presiding over the matter, actually did say in his summing up that Roseau Central had a case. And but the mere fact that we had not gotten a chance to have the matter ventilated through the courts, it is just sad news. But let me just say briefly before we go to our guest, that the government does understand that the electoral reform matter is not for the UWP, because the way that they have been expressing it is that, I mean, people saying in the government side that, yes, they say they want electoral reform, we're going to give them electoral. As if that you have a piece of a cake, or you have a cake, and then you're going to we want to put what ingredients you want in that cake. So then who don't want to eat the cake because they don't have taste for that ingredient? No. Electoral reform is for the general country, to electoral reform to reflect the will of the people.
And it's going to benefit them.
And it's going to benefit, of course.
Because they will be in opposition in a couple of years'
Yes,
time.
of course.
And they're going to be hewing and crying for electoral reform. So it's not about the United Workers' Party.
That is
It's
correct.
about preserving the process for all of Dominica.
Yes.
And for the next generation.
And for the next generation.
Absolutely.
Thank
Well, we
you.
need free and fair elections, man. It's about time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fountain. Of course, you're tuned to the Workers' Voice. Today, the 18th of April, 2024. Our online numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. Our overseas number is 305-432-9624. We're gonna get to our guests very, very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, before we do this, of course, let us spread joy, joy to the people of Dominica, because good things are coming with the leadership of Dr. Thompson Fontaine and a wonderful team from north to the south to the east to the west. We're gonna do. Now we're getting one call. Let me just call your line.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Good
Carl.
evening
Good
to the
evening.
panel, Mr. Fontaine, same old Ronald Charles.
I like that. I like that.
Gentlemen, that's the thing, I pointed out the other day that Roosevelt Skerritt has created the problem, and then he comes like he's the savior. Now, let's go a little bit back in history. Do you remember when he first made the person who is sitting as the Electoral Commission right now, when he first made him a CBI agent? Do you remember? I want to take you back to that time. He cited that person at that time as an opposition member. He said, oh, not all our CBI agents are supporters of the party. And he cited that person that he was making a CBI agent as a supporter. Can that be said, a supporter of the opposition? Can that be said today? Can that be said today? Now that some time has elapsed. So do we know what deal he struck with that person at that time? Now he makes that person commissioner. Is that the right terminology for him? Electoral commissioner?
Electoral chairman.
Chief electoral chairman.
Yeah, electoral office.
Chairman of the Electoral Commission.
That is good.
Correct.
Yes. Now that person has been a CBI agent for several years now. And of course, like I said, he cannot be considered as opposition anymore. And where is that person's voice? That's the point I'm coming to. When was the last time you heard that person speak on the events that are so critical to electoral reform? Skerritt has taken it over. Skerritt must have told him to be quiet because he has not spoken. Am I wrong, Mr. Thompson? Have you heard this man?
No, I'm still waiting. I mean, he has to step up.
My
Really,
God.
he needs to step
how
up.
obvious is this? This man is as mute as a mouse. He has not spoken. He should be the one taking the lead. He should be the one saying that nobody is going to stop us from getting this electoral. Not Roosevelt Skerritt. Roosevelt Skerritt, who has been holding it up all along, somehow has taken charge of it and made this guy mute. I mean, it's just so obvious that it is very wrong, Mr. Skerritt. This is not democracy. This is not how democracy works, Mr. Skerritt. And I'd like to appeal to the labor rights. Labor rights, do you want to live in a dictatorship in the future of Dominica? Do you see dictatorship as a solution? Think about that. Enough said, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla. Appreciate it.
Okay, now we're going to get into the second phase. And right about now, we're going to call. Yes, thank you. We're now going to call on Glenroy Susu Coffee to introduce our guests, Mr. David Edwards, who will be speaking to us tonight on education. Yes.
And thank you, Ronald, again, and thank you to our listeners. Let me say that is what we know. This is what we know about our guests, and I will say tonight, Mr. David Edwards completed his primary education at Wesley Government School before proceeding to the Dominica Grammar School. His contributions to Dominica include serving in different capacities in the education sector and managing the education reform program that was started in 1996. Over 4 years, he served as the first local director of the U.S. Peace Corps operations. Mr. Edwards has 2 decades of experience as a regional consultant on development programs, who specializes in innovations in education, project management, and strategic planning. His experience in the education sector includes sector analysis, preparation of policies and strategic plans, among others, as well as collaboration with stakeholders in every CARICOM country. He has worked with a number of regional governments, the OECS Commission, Caribbean Development Bank, CARICOM, and a range of development partners that includes World Bank, UNESCO, the Commonwealth, among others. Mr. Edward holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Natural Sciences from the University of the West Indies, Mona, a master's degree in Arts and Arts in Education, Curriculum Evaluation, Planning and Management in the context of national development from the University of Sussex in the UK, and an MBA from Durham University in the UK. He's married to Annie née Matthew and is the proud father of 2 children. Yes, so based on our topic tonight, I want to say that we would need to see as a party that where we are going to shape the development and the designs and implementation of education. And so with that, I would like to ask Mr. Edwards, what constitutes a good education system with respect to where we were, where we are, and what are the prospects for the future? Mr. Edwards, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share a bit of information that I've gathered along the way, my interpretation of things, my interpretation of the landscape, and my own thoughts based on my own experiences. When we talk about good education system, we really refer to an education system that offers quality opportunities with regards access, quality opportunities with regards equity. So you're talking about quality, access, and equity. And we're talking about programs that allow individuals to realize their aspirations, as well as programs that are aligned to national needs. So we're talking about programs that meet the needs of individuals as well as national needs. There are other important aspects of a quality program. A quality program is one that has a feedback mechanism for monitoring and evaluation, because education is a very dynamic sector, seeing that providers of education must anticipate needs and respond to needs. So the education development is not static. It's a very dynamic process. And part of that dynamism is a feedback loop. So that constitutes a quality system. I should also stress the importance of communication with stakeholders and stakeholder engagement.
Yes, thanks very much for this opening round. In terms of giving us a sense as to what the quality component is in terms of access, equity, realizing and something that's aligned to our national needs. Now, from your own experience, David, and having observed the education system in Dominica, having been a part of working within the education system, are you satisfied that this education system, as it is currently constructed, maximizes or gives the most to us in terms of national development?
At this point, there are many deficiencies in the system. There are deficits in policy. There are deficits in the relevance of curriculum. There are deficits in support services. I dare say their deficits in visioning. I mean, what's the vision for the education sector? There was a time when there was a lot of energy, a lot of focus, a lot of engagement on education development. That process started, well, it didn't start in the 80s, but it took a positive turn in the 80s when the Freedom Party got in. And it's very interesting. If you look at the 1982 publication of UNESCO, you'll notice that Charles Maynard identified some important issues in the education sector: development of primary education, continued support for early childhood, general curriculum reform, strengthened skills training, need for adult literacy, and he went on and on and on. Capacity development, establishment of board of governors in the secondary school, upgrading of school plans, and aspirations to establish a college of further education. So that debate, in terms of transformation of the system, took a positive turn in the 1980s when the Freedom Party got in. I reference that to make a point. And part of this issue, part of this point, is that there was a very good reason why, despite the ambitions, the Freedom Party did not accomplish those in 15 years at the helm, and which offer opportunities for lessons learned. The UWP government came to office and labeled itself the education government and embarked on a serious program of reform that was aimed at transitioning the system. And that program of reform, focused on increasing access to areas that were underserved. That translated into upgrading schools, school plans. For example, PSS was transformed from a asbestos building to a modern secondary school that offered equitable opportunities to the students at PSS. And it was supported by the establishment of a school library just outside the perimeter of the campus. Then we saw the establishment of Pierre Charles Secondary. We saw the establishment of the Cassie Bruce Secondary. And then later, the Northeast Comprehensive, as well as the upgrading of Isaiah Thomas. That infrastructure development strategy was aimed at addressing the issue of access in underserved areas and ensuring that children outside the Roseau area had access to reasonably good opportunities for secondary education that were that could compete with the traditional schools in the Roseau area. And over the years, we've seen the impact of that. We also had during that period a significant strengthening of the support services for education. So you had the setting up of a capacity for curriculum development, moving from a single curriculum officer to a four-man curriculum development unit. You had the establishment of testing and measurement. There's a reason why I'm giving you this litany. You had the testing of establishment of testing and measurement, the introduction of grade 2 assessment. You had the transformation of teacher education, because you can't have quality education without quality teacher education. Now, until 1996, 97, thereabout, the Teachers College offered a certificate in primary education. Within that period that I'm referring to, that is 96 to 2000, the Teachers College was positioned to offer improved teacher education program that translated into an associate degree for primary education, and an associate degree for secondary education. Then you had the introduction of learning support services with a focus on literacy and numeracy. You had strengthened school supervision. So a number of people were sent out to study school supervision, upgrading their skills into master degrees levels. You had the training of counselors. So at least 4 counselors were placed in the system. You had the introduction of a textbook provision program so that parents were not burdened with the cost of learning materials. That again is an equity issue, because if those parents who are professionals can meet the cost of critical learning materials, textbooks and support materials today, you would add laptops to that, then it means that those students who can't afford or come from the more impoverished homes would be disadvantaged. So a textbook provision program allow for certain leveling of the playing field where the prescribed textbooks are concerned. You had the establishment of education planning and management that included a trained person in the economics of education, a trained person in education policy, trained at the highest level. I mean, you're talking about sending people to some of the top institutions in the world, like University of London. We had the establishment of an office responsible for education publication and a capacity in the Ministry for Education Statistics. And Thompson, as you know, policy must be evidence-based. So it was important to ensure that you had that capacity for planning supported by expert knowledge in education statistics. So the education reform agenda encompassed all those inputs. What we have experienced over the last 2 decades, we've had some consolidation of gains, but we've had serious leakage and non-replacement. I'm giving you a long response to the question that you asked. And we have serious deficits in policy. We have skill leakage that has not been replaced. We have disengagement with stakeholders. We have a situation where communication is not given the kind of importance that it warrants. So, despite the fact that we have consolidated some gains, it appears that the continuous development of the education system has come to a halt. and people are involved in mundane tasks without no attention to the dynamism of the environment, the fact that the economic landscape has been changing rapidly, especially with the advent of technology. We have seen an increase in unemployment, sorry, meaning that our education and training services are not preparing our workforce for our manpower needs. And that's evidenced by the growth in unemployment, the increased reliance on imported labor, and the increased incidence of youth at risk. So, in my view, we need to pick up the mantle, uh, um, uh, go back to the drawing board, and appreciate that the development of the education sector is not it- it's not a you will never arrive at that. You have to keep developing the education sector. You can't say we have attained the objectives. You have to keep on reviewing the objectives and assessing the need for new objectives, and that translates into new revised vision, revised mission, review of resource allocation, new programs, revisiting capacity for implementation of those programs, etc., etc.
Yes.
Yes, and so I'm happy that you brought out some, and thanks for the salient points. You mentioned earlier that there were some deficits or rather deficiencies with respect to the curriculum policy and even what you call learning support services. Are you aware right now as we speak? Is there a current policy to address this? Because you are correct. Education is also be about continuous improvements because you cannot, it is not stock, it is not something that is cast in stones. As you go over time, you have to reevaluate and assess and come up with different ways. Are you aware that there's an education policy right now encompassing what you talk about the deficiencies and other aspects? Are you aware of that?
I am aware that efforts were directed at preparing a new education sector policy. I'm not aware that it has been disseminated. I'm not even aware that it is complete. So that's the limit of my awareness. Um, I would say, and you'll hear me repeating it over the next hour. One of the issues I have with the ministry is is its limited interest in sharing information. I mean, if you look at the ministry's website, you see very little information. Um, data on data on the education sector is not up to date. That is frightening because education matters, as as was illustrated in the publication that we had, Education Matters. That was the name of the publication. That publication actually showcased statistics. So the ministry, for some reason or the other, is not very good at sharing information. Is not very good at with regards to transparency. is not very good at accountability and to their own detriment.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, you know, David, I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking in terms of even the evolution of our education system. And one of the things I wanted to raise is the question of the fact that we seem to be spending an exorbitant amount of money on education. I mean, the government, for example, has several persons who, let's forget the problems now of not paying tuition, but it has several persons who've been sent to various education institutions and so on. And the question is, are we satisfied that the country is getting enough bang for its buck? In other words, the amount of money that has been spent on education, are we benefiting? Or is it that the vast majority of persons who benefit from a government scholarship or support simply disappear and never give back to Dominica? And I asked that because I remember when I was a student and I wanted to go to study, I was actually given a bond. Uh, and I suspect that probably that's why I came back to Dominica, because I was bonded to. Um, and it's a good thing I did. But I'm thinking that right now persons do not have this bond, and it's like you're just throwing money after education. But at the end of the day, these are individuals who are now building up the United States, building up other parts of the world, and not contributing to Dominica. In your assessment of the amount of money spent on education, through scholarship programs and everything else, are we getting a good return as a country on that level of investment?
I think the return on the investment in tertiary education, uh, um, tertiary education outside Dominica, meaning beyond the Dominica State College, I think the return on that investment is negligible. I don't have the data. However, anecdotal evidence suggests that the majority of the students, the majority of awardees do not return. They're serious. It's apparent that there are problems with that initiative. For one, the anecdotal evidence suggests that most of the beneficiaries are females. The anecdotal evidence suggests that um, most of the beneficiaries, if not all the beneficiaries, are linked to the Labour Party in some way, directly or otherwise. And the anecdotal evidence suggests that the vast majority of those students do not return to Dominica. I know of cases where people have completed their programs, and they've done everything that will ensure that they do not leave the United States. So the returns on those investments and are very negligible. There are also other concerns in terms of the the areas of specialization of those individuals. Some of them have gone into areas for which there are not job opportunities here. Um, there is also the issue of the economy not growing and not expanding to absorb some of those skills. Um, so there are all those issues, the relevance of the training, the extent to which it's aligned, and you made the point about bonding. Uh, when I was a young kid, I did my first uh, uh, university training on a US aid scholarship. I was bonded. I returned. And basically, I have never left, really. And my wife is the same. She was bonded. She returned. Um, Thompson, there are also issues, some other issues here. One of the problems we've seen over the last 2 decades in particular is an obsession with sending people to the United States to study. That is not the only destination, and I think if we are pragmatic, if we sit down and plan properly, we can get a bigger bang for any expenditure in tertiary education. First start, the technology has changed, right? We can do a hell of a lot of our first degree programs by distance or online. So that is one. The University of the West Indies Global Campus is also an option. You also have a number of regional universities that offer quality programs that are much cheaper than the offerings in the United States. Uh, of course, you have the Cuban program, um, and I should say that under between 95 and 2000, Dominica had the largest contingent of students in Cuba among the Caribbean countries. So among the Caribbean countries, Dominica had the largest contingent of students in Cuba. Cuba has been an option since Dominica opened diplomatic relations with Havana in somewhere around 95 or 96, right? But in addition to the options in Cuba, you have the University of Trinidad and Tobago, which is a good school. I'm not marketing for them, but you have the University of Trinidad and Tobago. You have the University of Technology Jamaica, or what used to be called CAS. Um, and then you have a range of other tertiary institutions in Jamaica. You also have the University of Guyana, which is a low cost institution, but is becoming increasingly buoyant in its curriculum offerings, especially now with oil being a major catalyst for economic development in Guyana. So you have all those institutions. You have the University of Northern Caribbean in Jamaica. You have the University of Southern Caribbean in Trinidad. All those institutions allow for the completion of bachelor's degrees that cost much less than the United States. And the point I want to make here is I think our focus on tertiary education has been wrong. I would recommend us leveraging technology to offer to allow students to stay home and complete course that do not programs that do not uh, necessitate in-person participation. And I would strongly recommend that we leverage regional programs, particularly for the bachelor's degree. So my recommendation is look at more affordable options for bachelor's degrees. Now, we have to understand that if you want to build professionals, they have to get to the level of master's degrees. These master's degrees, you can send them off to the global community. And I say the global community, not necessarily North America, because there are quality programs all over Europe, some of which are cheaper. In fact, you have courses, you have programs like the Technical University of Munich that allow uh, master's degree programs to be largely completed online, and then students just go to Germany to complete the practical aspects. Now that cut down costs tremendously. At the end of the day, you get a cutting edge program of training. You also have other options like that in other European countries. So what I'm saying is, look at lower cost options for the first degrees. Promote advanced degrees and send people overseas where those advanced training can be completed online, and broaden your options. Do not limit it to the United States, which is one, in many cases, very expensive, and two, once the beneficiaries get there, there's a temptation to remain in view of the bright lights as opposed to coming back to Dominica. And of course, that investment in postgraduate training, and I advocate postgraduate training at both master's and doctoral level, by the way. That's my recommendation. I advocate that those be aligned to national needs.
Thank
Yes.
you. Just before, Mr. Edwards, I've been listening, and the note taking must come in because I believe this is so important. And I think the information is for every Dominican that would need or that would appreciate your presentation, because I believe, the information is real. The information is basically, we need that kind of information so that we can understand the different policies that should be put in place in order that we can have a better educational system. But while you are speaking on the issue of education, and you mention areas of like the skills leakage and disengagement and communication, and the whole issue of the lovely film, which I think I'm going to start to adopt, is the education matters. um I'm starting now in retrospect, looking at the various other sectors. We touched on agriculture for the last couple of weeks, tourism, and every single sector. And sometimes you're forced to almost conclude that every single sector has those issues in one way or the other. Although predominantly it is focusing on education, we are focusing on education. But I just wanted to highlight that, and I'm really moved by some of the information that I'm getting here tonight, because I believe it's a very, very important and succinct information that we should embrace as a country. And what sometimes bothers me is, at the end of the day, people sometimes look at it, and because it's coming out on a certain radio station, therefore it should not be absorbed. But I believe the educational ministers, or minister, I believe the people that are involved in it should have their pen and paper and to continue to listen to tonight's program. So.
Yes, and David has raised again an important area I have with respect to concern, because when the secondary I have a note there. Oh yes, universal secondary education was introduced by the United Workers Party,
Yes.
and in fact that was a good policy where
Yeah.
children would come out from primary straight into secondary school
Mhm.
without even doing really an entrance test, but they would have to adapt to the various conditions and look at themselves. But you made a point about that modality we must really get into with respect to online learning, and that is very good. But I think too, based on what I've been following, is that since that introduction of the universal secondary education system, what you found out is that, because a recent study, although it is dated right now, that is the poverty assessment report that was conducted sometime in 2008, 2009, we've
Right.
seen a number of dropouts, and some of the reasons that were given is such that parents were not able to continue to send their children to school, and even so, students even found a way they call opportunity costs, so that they forego school to look for alternative methods of employment. But the interesting thing is that if at all we should continue, because not that a student may not want to be in school, but a student would have been preferred, who would prefer to stay home probably and learn. So the idea that if such a student drops out, we should not let go this child. We should follow up on this child or students so that they can continue the modality online, so that they get that spirit and that experience, so that will continue to give them that kind of opening, so that they will have more favor for education via the online modality with the respective universities. So I'm happy that you brought up that point. The point is, notwithstanding your policies, whether you have a policy or not, for everybody to all you want to make every sure that everybody have a universal education thing or graduate in every home. That's not just about the point. That's just a broad policy. It may never even happen. What you need to do is get value for money, but also prepare people with a certain modality, with a certain experience, a certain concept of learning, so that they will not feel left out at the end of the exercise. So thank you very much for that.
Let's take a call. Yes, caller, you're live.
Yes, I am. Gentlemen, I like Soso's attack or his angle, but I'm gonna take the risk of being accused of playing politics.
I love that.
When the gentleman outlined what he outlined there, you have to keep in mind UWP was there for how many years? 4 years?
4 years. 4 years.
Yeah. And when you keep that in mind, it's like, oh my God. And they were there for how many? 20 who? It's really remarkable that these 4 years of intense upswing in the education system, as opposed to 20 years of a sliding downward. I mean, it's really apparent. And I mean, like I said, I stand accused, but the facts are the facts, gentlemen.
That's correct. Thank you, sir.
Yes, caller, the online or the on-air numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097-616-4257. Overseas line is 305-432-9624. We're talking education, and our guest this evening is Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edwards have given us a nice overview of the educational system, going way back to 95 and even and up to the present time. Some of the challenges that we're faced with and some of the things that needs to be done in order that we can enhance our educational system. Of course, Dr. Fountain is in the house with us, and I'm Soso, man from. Okay, we have a caller. Caller, you're live. Caller, you're live. Good night. Caller, you're live.
Yeah, good night. Good night to the political leader, deputy political leader. So good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Thomas, how's everybody doing?
Yeah.
Good.
Good night to your guest, Mr. Edward.
Good night.
I keyed in on something Mr. Edward said when he spoke about the online modality, how important that can be when we're talking about special education. I remember when I did my bachelor's degree with University of Maryland, and a large part I was at sea on the ship when I did most of my bachelor's degree, and was able to get a lot of it done through the online programs. Also, for my when I went up for my master's degree, I did that at the University of Phoenix, and a large portion of that was done in classrooms, but online. Even at the doctorate level, after the unit, I went back to the States, was to do my residency, which was only for about 4 days. So I believe it is very critical that one of the areas that we look at is that online modality, because as you outlined, you can get a lot more bang for the buck by having students. I mean, it's much cheaper for students staying in Dominica at home and go about the daily business, and that student is able to communicate to their university, whether locally, regionally, or internationally, and get that program done. Having said that, though, one of the focus that we really need to keep in mind is that whatever it is the state is going to sponsor students study, we must really evaluate that very closely, because we need to look at the return on that investment, because it is an investment, and the state in the end, the people who are paying for this education at the end must benefit from that investment. So it's critical that we look at that online modality, especially in this age when technology plays a large role in how we get educated. Because as stated, it is it is possible, and it's assured that doing that we get not only bang for a buck, but it's also more convenient and more comfortable for the students, because we're able to spend less, and they're in a much more normalized environment where they can actually learn just as if they were in the brick and mortar classroom. Gentlemen, the program I'm listening. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
sir.
much.
You know,
Now,
the only issue about that though is that you would think that, and I'll go to Dave in a while, is that a lot of the students nowadays are thinking, boy, that's my ticket out of Dominica. So
That is,
if you start talking about online, and that's the reason why I think it has you must have some way of getting them back. And as you said, David, you did, your wife, you came back, I came back because I was bonded. I mean, I like to think that I'm patriotic, but the idea that you knew that if you not come back, you're going to exact the price because you have to get somebody. Basically, it was like a loan. The government was giving you some resources, but you had to get somebody to sign for you, and you know that if you not come back, that person could be impacted. So that was an incentive to come back. And because what I don't like, and somebody's saying, but are you against what the government is doing? One student for one university credit for every classroom? No, we're not against it. In fact, it's a great policy. All I'm saying is that you have to find a way to get at least a portion of those students who go overseas to come back. But if you're constantly spending hundreds of millions of dollars to educate your young people and they're not giving back to your country, at the end of the day, your country is worse off because these are monies that you could have used in other areas is going towards education, but you're not getting a return on it. And that's how we have to think about this whole education issue. Yes, we want to see every house will have a graduate student in there, but we want a graduate student to be working in Dominica and helping to develop Dominica. And that's what we're saying.
And Dave, maybe I have a question for you, because oftentimes we see that scholarships are given based on what is available. I mean, a government, because we've maybe had diplomatic relations, a government will offer you scholarships. But what is available as opposed to what the country needs?
Right.
How do you see that, and how does that shape into the whole?
okay. I remember many years ago, someone in the meeting said, even a scholarship has a cost. Remember, if you are an awardee of a scholarship and you are employed, say in the public sector, you may be qualifying for a year with salary. If you accept a scholarship, or when you accept a scholarship, there's a cost in the sense that you are not earning during that period. And of course, there are scholarships and scholarships, meaning some scholarships do not meet all the costs. There was a time when people used to use the word bursary. Nowadays, 1 year out of 1 year support out of a 4-year program is labeled a scholarship. So my response to that, it depends. It depends on the extent to which that scholarship covers everything, and it depends on the area. Now, because of the nature of the environment we live in, you can have emerging areas for which needs are not very apparent now, but maybe become more visible in a year or two, right? So that's an issue. Where postgraduate training is concerned, one of the things that we should do as a country is ensure that the areas where students do research, as translated in their thesis, those areas are relevant. So, and that's one of the deficits we have. A student is doing a master's thesis, uh, try to ensure that research is done in a relevant area and the research findings are shared. Some of our Caribbean neighbors actually do that, you know. A student is doing a PhD thesis, a research degree, try to ensure that as fast as possible, it won't work 100%, but as fast as possible, influence the area of research and get a copy of that thesis. Because we are in an environment where decisions should be evidence based. One of the problems we have is uh, is the absence of a research culture. That's the bottom line. We don't have a research culture. Now, when we say research, people seem to think that you always have to be in some big lab doing some huge experiment. But the truth is, social policy should be data driven. Economic policies should be data driven. One of the things I strongly believe in is, for example, at the secondary level, all our teachers should have master's degrees. But in addition to that, so you're talking about, in addition to that, there should be a robust in-service training program, and that should be coupled with encouragement of continuous learning. And I would recommend, right? I would recommend very strongly that for the budget for education make allowances for grants for teachers who would undertake action research. That is research that is relevant to the environment and the challenges they experience on a continuous basis in the classroom. And that those action research findings be disseminated among actors in the education sector. I would even advocate for a portal to be established. So first, you upgrade your teachers, getting them at a master's level in your secondary system, for example, so that immediately equip them with some research skills. Then to nurture lifelong learning and continuous upskilling, you budget for grants whereby and they can be awarded on a competitive basis. Say, look, we offer grants for teachers for 20,000, 25,000, 30,000. Teachers apply. They submit a proposal. It might be learning, teach pedagogical um, uh, experiences in numeracy learning or literacy, which are relevant, and they get a grant. They conduct some research. Probably they conduct their research over 2 summers or over a year or whatever. And one condition for the grant is that you share the findings.
Okay.
And
Okay,
and
David. Mhm.
if you
David,
can
on yes.
cultivate, sorry, go ahead.
Yes,
Go
sure.
ahead.
No, not to interrupt you, but we have somebody holding on. We will come back. Let them. They probably have a question on that issue to raise with you. So we're gonna take them and we'll come back
Yes.
to you. To you.
Caller, you're live. Good night.
Yeah,
Lucas
greetings
Boy.
come to and the same Ronald Charles and the entire crew. So,
Yes.
greetings.
Yes.
Good evening, man.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, I'm just listening. And I get the sense of your guest, something he was saying that I think we lack in vision. And I remember when you had a program this last week or week before on agriculture, I was saying that it's really important to have a vision where we want to go. And I say that because to provide scholarship for students, it should be focused on our needs. For example, we know Dominica is or it should be an agriculture-based economy. And most of the scholarship should go, to me, it should go in soil research or marketing, distribution. In terms of construction, we could have construction engineering, because that's where we're lacking. To hear a prime minister come out and say we haven't got skilled workers or Dominican people can't work or we can't do this. I mean, that's nonsense. Some of the scholarship like political science and business management, yes, they're important. But if we have a vision as to where we want to take our country, we should focus on our needs. And where we come in short, that's where the focus should be. You know, it's a shame in 2024 that we haven't got good construction workers or good electricians. You know, I mean, we could have coupled electrical engineering or soil management or distribution, you know, something that's based on our focus to develop Dominica. And I always put agriculture at the center. So it should be like research in soil or in disease control. So we wouldn't have that problem we have with Sikatoga or whatever the name is. When a disease hit Dominica, it will wipe our entire field. If it's yam disease affecting yam, the whole country is out of yam because there's a, I mean, those things, we cannot tolerate those things. So I'm say all that to say that once we have a clear vision, I think we will make a lot of progress if we know what we want and where we want to go. You cannot do things vike or just put your hands up in the air and where the wind blow, you go. Anyway,
Absolutely.
good program, my brothers. I'm listening. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Thanks for your contribution.
Caller, you're live.
Gentlemen, I hate to call so often, but I
Seems
And
you're in the education
education-
line.
I hope you get the, I hope you try the lotto and get the lucky numbers again as well.
Education is your topic.
Can I go ahead?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
go ahead.
The simple idea of reintroducing the bond changes this whole thing from a handout to a proper hand up, and it makes the transaction proper. It's no longer just something that you're using to get a vote. It's a proper transaction. It just makes it right. You have the bond, the person comes back to take the responsibility and contribute to the country. It's not just a handout. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir.
and I will also add very quickly as well, if the person comes back and then they cannot find employment, then you have the obligation to release them from the bond.
Right, yeah.
But the first option is that they return.
Mhm.
And then, so don't think that if you can't get something, you'll just keep you around for 5 years. No.
Mhm.
If you cannot find the gainful employment within that period of time, then you have a chance to go elsewhere.
Definitely. Yes.
Yes, David.
Yes.
Yeah.
you will continue.
So I mentioned well just before the last call the fact that if you upskill your teachers, you raise the bar for your teachers in the education sector, because in the secondary sector, the secondary sector is particularly important because we still have a low transition rate to tertiary, right? And that's not unique to Dominica, but the fact that doesn't give us comfort. So you have people leaving the secondary sector and entering the labor force. So you have to position these individuals to continue learning. Some of them may get into tertiary programs after a few years in the workplace. And of course, you have a much smaller number going on to the Dominica State College and a smaller number yet going on to university. It's important that the secondary education system be made very robust. And part of that is upgrading your teachers, get them to a master's level, and equip them with those research skills so they will be better positioned to give a quality program and they are the guardians of the classroom. The
Mm.
ministry can set policy, but what happens there in those classrooms is really dependent on the technical competencies of those
Mhm.
teachers. And so if
Indeed.
you can get those teachers in a position where they can undertake action research, so as to improve both the quality of their programs and the quality of learning, and give better advice and policy options, then you'll have a education system that is much more quality oriented. And I say one way you can enable that is upgrade the teachers, set the bar as a master's degree, provide grants, and of course, I would say, hey man, increase the salaries for those teachers
Absolutely.
so as
Absolutely.
to recruit and retain talent. So
Yes,
that's
Dave.
my policy recommendations on the teachers in the
Great.
education system.
And I'm glad you raised it, because you in that context you raise the idea of research, just doing research and so on. And the question I have for you is, do we have a problem in Dominica of male learning? What I mean by this is, do we have a problem with our young boys being at a complete, in terms of the numbers, does it sheer numbers, the sheer volume? When I taught a few years ago, well, a few years now, probably 50 years ago in this country at the Sixth College, the balance was almost equal. In fact, there were probably more guys in my class than there were women. There were young girls, I think, or at least it was very close. Now I'm told that the ratios are completely reversed, in the sense that you have very few young boys or young men even at the secondary. I mean, at the tertiary, not here called the state college. Is that a fact? Is that a problem for us in Dominica?
Yeah, absolutely, Thompson. You're absolutely right, and that is evidenced in one the um, the number of boys on the block. When we talk about youth at risk, that 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 group is male dominated. All over Dominica, you have guys sitting on the block. If you drive past the UE Global Campus, you will notice that the participants in the programs are largely women. The guys they either drop off their girlfriends and their wives. So that's the level of their interest. Um, Thompson, it goes back to the effectiveness of the school system. The school system is not supportive of male learning style, right? And you also have a situation where the teaching staff is dominated by women, the feminization of of teachers, which has become a very global trend to a large extent, where women dominate the teaching sector, and that, but it it is widely believed that the learning styles of males are different from those of females. That situation is compounded by the low representation um, of males within the teaching fraternity. What we see happening in Dominica, all over the Caribbean, for that matter, is that uh, um, literacy rates are lower among males, and in some cases, numeracy rates are on par with females, but in some cases, females even do better with literacy. So part of the one of the initiatives that must be undertaken is to strengthen pedagogical competence with regards imparting information to boys. And I don't think we're giving adequate attention to that. It appears to be a situation where there is no concern about the growing army of young men on the block. It's as if they hail from a different country. Uh, it's not our problem. It is our problem. It creates a social problem that translates into substance abuse, antisocial behavior, etc., etc. The system is not addressing the issue of male learning in adequate ways. And the number of interventions you probably need parenting programs, but you also need um, interventions at the level of the school. You need a strengthened capacity for counseling. You don't have enough counselors in the school. The placement of counselors in the school started in 1995, 96, 97. It has not grown to where it should be. For example, as far as I know, we have one counselor for the for the western region. To give you an example, in one country, um, as part of my work, I brought in external university to train 25 counselors at master's degree level. I brought in the institution rather than send the counselors. So the counselors remain on the job, and they were doing postgraduate degrees and research that are relevant to the culture of that particular country. And that was in one Caribbean country. 25 counselors. But we have not increased the number of counselors that we should have in the education system. That's a serious deficit that contributes to this issue of the males. There's another issue here. We do not have career guidance officers in the school system. And career guidance officers are not the same as counselors.
Wow.
So that's a
Dave,
deficiency in the education system at
yes.
this point in time.
Yes.
Just
Okay,
a bit.
Let's take the
that's a
caller.
question. We'll take a question. after
Caller,
this.
you're live.
Yes, hey, good evening, gentlemen, in particularly the political leader and your guest, Dr. David Edwards. I call him doctor because I know he's a very bright man.
That's good.
I hope that you are recording this program for a repeat. I would highly recommend that you repeat this program next week or very soon because it's an excellent program. What I would like to ask David to comment on is, would he associate, or does he have insufficient information, at least by observation, that the weakness of the technical programs in the secondary school, technical vocational programs, may be, or the drop in that this program at the secondary school level may be contributing to the situation of the boys, more or less boys, getting involved in the education in terms of education generally, and in particular continuing education.
Thank you, caller.
You're spot on. You're spot on. We're talking about inadequacies in the curriculum. When the Universal Secondary Education Program was launched, it meant universal access, but it also meant meeting the needs of all individuals, learning styles and interests, right? Now, you're talking about an evolution of the system. So a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but some people only focus on the access aspect. We have not gone beyond the access issue to the extent that we should, meaning that we have not focused enough on quality. And one way this is evident is the inadequacies in skill training. Skill training has not been upgraded to align technical competencies with employment opportunities and market needs, as well as interests. We had a wonderful reminder when Hurricane Maria hit us, but instead we thought it was more sexy to bring in external workers. So we have a deficit in skill training. In addition to that, I should say that skills training need to encompass digital skills training. There's a wonderful opportunity that the government has now. The rebuilding of the Goodwill Secondary School. I've not heard any pronouncement as to what that is meant to be. My hope is that they're not going to reestablish the Goodwill Secondary School as it was prior to removal of the students. They should set up I would strongly recommend that they should set up the Goodwill Secondary School as a center of excellence for digital skills and other skills. That would involve selection of appropriate courses. It would involve partnership with the private sector for work-based learning purposes. It would involve partnership with the parents and other stakeholders. And if it were to be set up as a center of excellence for digital skills. Remember, we're in a digital economy. That's where we're heading globally. And very little attention is paid to that in Dominica. There lies the opportunity. Set up that school as a center of excellence. And it could collaborate effectively with the DGS, because the DGS is just down the road. The link road allows for collaboration between those two institutions and the non-duplication of programs. But that would involve serious visioning and planning. That would involve training those teachers properly.
Yes.
That training should have started.
And David, I'm happy that you spoke little about the skills part, because I was also about asking you about the TVET Council, the Technical and Vocational Education and Training. But more so, would you care to tell us about the Education Review Committee?
Yes, the Education Review Committee is an important policy deficit, right? When the Education Act 1997, when that was enacted, it envisaged that education development was a dynamic process. You're never going to arrive at it. You have to keep working at it. And it provided for the Education Review Committee. Section 147 of the Act says that 146, it says, and I'll read it from the Act, every 5 years, or as soon as practicable thereafter, Cabinet, on the recommendations of the minister, shall appoint an Education Review Committee every 5 years. And that committee is an integral part of the development mechanism for the education sector.
Thank you.
That committee has a list of duties as prescribed in the Act. And one of its duties is that it would submit a report to the minister. And that report shall be tabled. I'll read it directly from the Act. The report of the Education Review Committee shall be submitted to the minister, who shall cause it to be laid before the House of Assembly. After the report of the Education Review Committee has been laid before the House of Assembly, it shall be printed and sold to the public.
Wow.
Wow. And that's where
that is a mechanism to monitor the performance of the education system.
Wow.
And it is enshrined in law. It shall be established. Have you ever heard this that have you ever heard anything about an education
Never.
Never.
committee?
First time I heard that.
If
That's all
if,
it-
if we're serious about quality education, management of the sector, and dissemination of information, the citizens of this country should demand that the minister does the work that is required
Wow.
from the office.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And
Yes.
that's a wonderful
You know,
note.
Boy.
Yes, Dr.
yeah,
Fonke?
yeah. I just wanted to add, we've gotten quite a number of comments, and I wanted to read at least one or two or three of them. But let me read this one.
Yeah.
Several very, very good comments that we are getting. And we also want to thank as well those of you on social media that are clearly from the other side. And so we welcome you and thank you for your inputs as well,
That's right.
defending the Dominican Labour Party recording education. We thank you for that. Thank you for those inputs.
Yeah.
I'm going to read this one. It says the Dominica Education Enhancement Program was implemented between 2010 and 2015 with a US $4 million loan from CDB. There were 5 consultancies done: multi-grade, curriculum development, numeracy, maintenance of schools, and early screening. Over 4 million was spent on teacher training, mostly tertiary training and specialized training in various fields. Over 2 million was spent on tools and equipment for technical vocation. Some of these tools and equipment may still be locked up in storage. You ask about returns on investment. We are not getting adequate returns for sure.
That's right.
Also, I don't believe that the recommendations of the various consultancies have been and are being adequately implemented. Prime example is the curriculum development report. The curriculum should have already been reviewed to allow every child to leave school with at least one skill. Also, the trained teachers are not being properly utilized. Some teachers are not being used in the area of expertise, and some equipment which were purchased for skills training may still be locked up in storage. Just to make the point, the concept of a center of excellence at the Guru Secondary School in collaboration with DGS was one of the ideas of the Education Enhancement Project. That has never
Interesting.
been
Interesting. Wasn't aware of that.
Right. Thank you so much. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost there. Oh, matter of fact, yeah.
We should read a couple more.
But just before we leave you, of course, we will get the closing remarks from our guest, Mr. Edward. And of course, the political leader is with us. And Mr. Soso for Rosa. I think Soso for education.
Yeah.
Yes, let me just ask a question from our audience, and we certainly would like, because we want to encourage more of our viewers on social media
Yes.
to interact, to
That's right.
send. So we need to acknowledge those who've sent in comments. But there is one that I wanted to pose to you, David, that comes in from an individual there. William is asking, he's saying rather, and I would like your reaction to his comment that says universal secondary education was a mistake. How is it doing? I met a student in first form who did not know his ABCs. I wonder, how did this come about? I offered to help him at break time and after school, but he was not interested. Not sure how he ended up. That was at NECS, that's Northeast Comprehensive School, in 2006, 2007. I hope that this is not the case anymore. What's your take on universal secondary education? As was
I would contend that it was not a mistake. Some people have held on to this notion that it was an error. I think otherwise. What I believe is that we have not put in place the necessary resources to support students who are slower, and we have not amended the menu to cater for their needs. I'd just like the caller to know that in all developed countries, all students access secondary school, and that is the case in a number of Caribbean countries. Also, in a number of Caribbean countries, what they're seeking to do is to give students access to tertiary education. So while you're wrestling with universal secondary, countries are seeking to give access to universal
So,
tertiary,
yeah,
Yes, yes.
because I was
right?
thinking about it. I mean, if you're in the US and in the the big countries, this
Exactly.
automatically you go on, you move from primary school to secondary school. It happens all the time. Why can't we
Look,
do it?
look at Finland, which has the best education system in the world. And
Mhm.
and I just want to say one thing else to the one additional point to the caller. You think education is a challenge? Try ignorance, right? We've seen the data shows that students in sub-Saharan Africa, students who get into farming after exposure to 1 or 2 years in secondary school turn out to be more efficient farmers than those who didn't access secondary, even if they only spent 1 or 2 years there. And you may not want to relate it to farming here, but just think of a student who gets into the construction industry after 1 or 2 years in secondary school. He's a much better construction worker who might be building your house than the student who was deprived of the opportunity to access secondary education.
Very good.
Yes, indeed. And then another comment that says, to Mr. Edwards' point, studies show that boys learn differently than girls. Some experts say there are no differences between boys and girls in terms of what they can learn, but there are big differences in the way to teach them.
Absolutely.
So I think to support the point that you made earlier about the importance of girls, and if I could just take one more comment that we've received there on social media. There were lots more, but let me just select. Where did it go to? Okay, I seem to have lost it. But yeah, but I think the point is well made, David, that in terms of education can really be a critical stepping stone for countries' development. But at the end of the day, you really need to look very closely at the return that you're getting when you spend this endless amounts of money on education. And the education bill is high. I mean, we've had issues, of course, of non-payment of tuition and fees and so on for students. But at the end of the day, the amount that has been spent has been a huge burden on the taxpayers of Dominica. And you must demand some more in terms of return for this, that the students don't only come back to vote, but they come back to contribute to the development of the country.
Absolutely. Now we are getting to the end of the program. Today is the 18th of April, 2024. And in studio you have Mr. Glenroy Susu Coffee, of course, the political leader and our guest, Mr. Edwards. Okay, we're going to go now to the closing remarks. We'll now ask on Mr. Susu Coffee, 1 minute.
Yes, and thank you, Ronald, for the opportunity again. It's a pleasure to have been on this program. I must say to you, Mr. David. Oh, I can tell you, Mr. Edward, I don't know. And you know what is good about it? Homegrown. You are a born Dominican. And see the kind of resource that is available. I don't know if you were asked any time at one point in time whether or not you could contribute some of your expertise towards the development of the education system. But you know it is, sometimes if you have an opposing view, you may never be asked. Let me just say, first of all, that the prayer that was issued by Teacher Ernie, I think, gave our program some blessings, I think, and we of course we rolled in so well. Let me thank the many callers who have participated and called on social media. Let me thank everyone for their comments, especially I'm seeing a guy there, Joe Boston. You must tell good night to you. I am reading all your comments, but I am not here to comment on them because I know when you look at our track record of 4.5 years compared to 20 plus years, you know that is non-comparable. But
he's
non-comparable. But the most important is listening. So I thank you for the very nice points you're bringing in, but they are non-comparable. But we're good. But we are saying again, people of Dominica, and that is the kind of spirit that we want to start to exhibit and engaging. And you can see we are sourcing and enhancing and harnessing on what we have. And we know we have a lot. And so the United Workers' Party is well poised to actually is poised to tap on the resource that we have in Dominica. So I want to say thank you again, Ronald, for the opportunity. Have a God bless. Good night to you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And now we'll ask our guest, Mr. Edwards, to just closing remarks.
In short, I'll say education matters.
I like that.
Education matters, and we should ensure that we are engaged in the education development process.
Excellent.
It's not a partisan issue.
It's a Dominican issue.
Absolutely.
And not only that, because it's not just for Dominica, but it's for the entire region. And education brings a better social life. It brings attention to detail. It have our young people more focused. So education is key. Education matters. And now we'll call on our political leader for his closing remarks. As we know, United Workers' Party, the 4 years they've been there, 1995 to 2000, I believe. At the end of the day, did so much. We talk about so much that Mr. Edwards was able to highlight with us and that we know about it. But Dr. Thompson Fontaine, where do we go now?
Well, let me just begin in my concluding remarks to thank David for giving us his expertise in that area and for really sharing with us, his vast experience in education. Let me thank Soso as well, and of course, you, Ronald, and we miss our PRO, of course, Steve. We wish you speedy recovery. But I want to say, I want to let our listeners know that we are not doing this just because we like to hear ourselves talk.
That's right.
We are doing these programs because we believe that there are key things, there are key aspects that goes into the development of a country. And those things we need to get a very firm hold on. We need to examine them closely. We need to see, where there are shortfalls, how they can improve, how they can be bettered. And we are taking notes as we speak. So when we're talking about education, when we're talking about the fact that we are miseducating our young people, we are losing a significant portion of our young men because they're not going on. They're dropping out from high school. They're not going on to the state college. They're not moving on with further education. We understand that that's going to create a problem, as David correctly pointed out. That's going to create a social problem for the country because these are the same young men who get frustrated and begin to snatch the purses and break into people's homes and so on. It has an implication. It has implications for us. So as we go through that process of learning, it is to help us begin to formulate policy that will improve and better things. So we've learned a lot tonight in terms of what can be done, what has been proposed, and our listeners have been kind enough to provide concrete examples and to send us information, and that we want to continue to encourage. For those of you on social media, including Joe Boston, thank you for your interaction. You were very active tonight.
Great guy.
Told us quite a lot, but let me just assure you, as Soso said, 4 years does not equal 24. And we're really appreciative of all of you. I mean, taking your time to listen and to contribute as well. And we, going forward, we most likely will revisit or we'll continue with another perspective on this education aspect. But one thing we can promise you here on the Workers' Voice is that we are committed to the development of this country. We are committed to building up, not breaking down. We are committed to encouraging people, not discouraging them. We are committed to working together. After all, it's about Team Dominica. It's
That's
about
correct.
all of us working together for a better Dominica. We welcome new voices. We welcome new inputs. All the knowledge does not rely within us, the few of us in the United Workers Party leadership. We need your support. We need your coming on board with us and working diligently with us to move Dominica forward. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We've gone well past our time tonight, but we thank you no less for staying with us. And please join us next week for another edition of the Workers' Voice. But also, we just want to remind you of the conference, the economic conference coming up. Put this on your calendar, June 4th to the 6th, 2024. Major economic conference, summit rather. It's called the Dominica Economic Summit, Planning for Economic Development and Sustainability. You want to be a part of that. You want to be participating in that. So join us for that. You'll be in a lot more in the coming week. We'll be having a press conference to give you more information on this particular conference, on this particular summit. It's a summit bringing together all the minds to plan and strategize on our economic development. So thank you, Dominica. Have a great night and God bless you.
And great work politically.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
And
Good night.
thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Edwards.
yes, sir.
Dr.
Good night.
Thompson,
Thanks.
thank you so
All right.
much for
Yeah.
being here. And may God
Thanks.
continue to bless this wonderful country while we move, while we go to our homes. Blessing to the entire listenership. We thank you so much for listening. And as one of the callers said, I believe we're going to have a repeat of this one, definitely. And we will extract a lot of good things from it. I want to thank our guests. I want to thank all those who are listening, sponsors, and everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you for tuning into the Workers' Voice, another edition. Today, the 18th of April 2024. We got to go. Good night and so long.
Let's get together. Be Lord. Dance and dance to the Lord. Be Lord. Let's get together and be alright. Hear the children crying, hear the children crying, saying give thanks and praise to the Lord, and I will be alright. Saying let's get together and be alright. Oh, let them pass all the dirty